Hello, and welcome to the ECR Retail Loss, Sell More and Lose Less podcast series. My name is Colin Peacock. I work with a community of experts and academics who are keen to share their latest research findings and best practices. And every week or two in this series, I'll be joined by one of those experts and academics to discuss some of the very latest insights from our meetings and discussions and research on best practices. This week I'm joined by Professor Beck, and we're looking at the role of RFID in grocery and the potential to reduce waste on fresh meat and improve productivity. We had a meeting on RFID recently. We were looking at the use of RFID in grocery sort of supermarkets. And we had over 100 people on the call. It was immensely popular, huge level of interest. And we had a couple of retailers share their tests and trials and their updates in terms of where they're going with this. Other retailers also sharing where they've got to with this. Seemed to be really rich in learnings, and it was a terrific session. But what do you write down as your key sort of notes and takeaways, perhaps, that retailers can think about as they think about the use of RFID in grocery retail?
Yes, it was an interesting session, wasn't it? Because we're so used to listening only really from apparel retailers, where they've been sort of ploughing it forward and getting real sort of benefits from investing in RFID. So it was interesting to hear from some pretty big grocers who are now moving into this space to try and understand how they can benefit from RFID. And sort of traditionally, it's sort of been a no-no area, really, hasn't it? Issues around the sort of types of products, particularly that grocers stock, which are not very RFID friendly. They're lots of metal shelving and metal tins and lots of viscous fluids, which have traditionally been sort of the enemies of making RFID work well.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, of course, the grocery is very much about fairly low value, high volume product, which can make RFID challenging as well in terms of cost and making sure that the data is accurate. But actually what we heard was really very encouraging, I thought. We got some results back, which was basically saying, yes, those issues used to be a problem. The technology was an issue, but not anymore. Very few people were saying they were having problems getting these tags to read in what was often regarded as a very hostile environment for those tags. So it was encouraging to hear how the technology's really progressed now to deal with some of those sort of inherent physics issues that we used to talk a lot about.
Yeah, and it was also really interesting, and maybe you're about to say this, but it was like, not only does it work, but actually it's starting to uncover some of the inaccuracies that were previously hidden from view. So the level of sort of accuracy of expiry dates and the products and the number of products that were shipped that weren't shipped, etc. So that was really interesting in the number of products they found, when they're doing that.
And that's obviously an area where traditionally apparel, for the most part, are not too worried about sell-by dates. Obviously they have seasons, but they're not worried about meat going off the next day, sort of thing. But that's a real potential win for grocers, isn't it? Because they're managing this sort of stock, and they need to be very sensitive to product going out of date, because they could lose a lot of money. They need to when to do that. And of course, RFID really begins to offer some major benefits there in terms of enabling them to rotate their stock, to make sure that they understand the shelf life of some of these products. So we heard some great stories, particularly around meat, didn't we? Which is obviously quite a high value product for a lot of them, and managing that well is very important. So there's some great case studies there about how they were getting some pretty good wins from investing in RFID, particularly around fresh.
Yeah,
and sort of meat products in particular.
Yeah, it was fascinating. Yes,
but I think what did come through though, as a sort of note of caution, as we're going to say, is I think one of the very big retailers who've been trialing this raised this point, which is that in apparel you may have perhaps 5 or 6 suppliers where you can begin to impose some sort of source tagging strategy upon them, can't you? Because there aren't too many to deal with. What they made the point was that in our world of grocery, you can have dozens, potentially hundreds of suppliers coming into your stores on a daily basis. And that makes the challenge of getting a source tagging strategy in place very difficult. You've got to sign up an awful lot more people to agree to do source tagging to make this a scalable proposition. and one that's sustainable for you, because a lot of the trials, the tagging was happening within the business. And we know from our world of apparel that, you've really got to get to source tagging to make this a viable strategy. So I think that was a concern they had about how they might try and deal with the sort of the operating product environment in which they're working as grocers.
Yeah, so we did hear some people taking perhaps the easier route initially by looking at the store production items, so items produced in the store, put an RFID label on them. Because the other thing a lot of retailers don't want to do, especially in the UK, is sell products beyond their use date. So there's huge fines from the authorities if you are selling or presenting products for sale beyond their expiry date. So some of the production items I think might be interesting, but that doesn't require source tagging. You just put the label on in the butchery area. But yeah, I hadn't really thought about that point about just the number of different local suppliers. You've got in this particular space, especially in meat and protein.
Yes, and I think the other thing that was quite interesting was, again, we look at apparel because we've got now so many good case studies in RFID working well, and you see there that probably well over 95% of product has got the same tag is used, basically a loop tag that they can attach to the garment, and so the tag hangs down from the tag, and that works well in terms of getting read rates and so on. When you get into a much more varied product proposition, which is grocery, some of them are recognizing that you need different types of tags to make the read effective, and we've seen this from other retailers, haven't we? Somebody like, for instance, Decathlon, where they spent an awful lot of time and energy designing their tags to work for particular types of products to enable that accuracy of read. And so that's another level of complexity in some respect for grocery, which is not only is it challenging to get the source tags, you may have to have different types of tags for different types of providers. So it could be potentially very complicated for them. But at the same time, having said all that, that there was clearly the trials that have been carried out, the value was very clear what they were getting from this, in terms of as you mentioned, in terms of having transparency of product, visibility, accuracy of inventory, and so on. Which in a world of grocery where margins are tight, that can be a real added value if you can begin to get that sort of level of accuracy and transparency in your supply chain. That can make a real difference to profitability.
Yeah. What was your sense in terms of the outlook then, in terms of where RFID sits? Do you see a sunny uplands, as Mr. Boris Johnson would say? Where do you see it going, and what do you see some of the sort of hoops that they're going to have to go through to make it anywhere near as, I guess, widespread as we see in apparel? Or maybe you'll never get there.
Well, no, I think that I've always been very clear in my mind that the value of RFID is in the ID. It's the ability to begin to identify, know something about specific products. So I think, what we'll see in grocery is a real transition where the 2D barcode will be wheeled out a lot more now, because you can get the same information on the 2D barcode, but you don't have as much complication. Because you're relying on line of sight to make it work in that respect. But you then get a lot of value. So I think what we'll see is a sort of grocery will go on a journey of using a lot more of 2D barcodes to get the value from that product, work through then the integration of that data into their existing systems, which is challenging itself. And then I think for certain ranges within stores, we'll see the gradual use of the RF element, and maybe even others like Bluetooth, for instance, which is coming through as another communication mechanism to get the ID, transmitted. And so I think they'll go on a similar journey, but it'll probably be, I think, a faster journey than we saw with apparel, which took best part of 20 years. I think grocery will move quicker because they've got this almost stepping stone of 2D that they can see that they can get a lot of value from that, and then begin to pick out particular products where the RF element really adds extra value, and bring that in as we go.
Yeah, and we've already seen in some of the apparel use cases how retailers have sort of augmented RFID with 2D. Perhaps to your point, and what you're saying is that in grocery, RFID may augment 2D, if I may say it that way. So in the apparel sector, it's with returns fraud, right? One retailer sort of use that 2D because they don't have the integration with the POS. So yeah, I can see that. I think that I can buy all that. So very interesting. Well, thank you very much, for those thoughts. And we will sort of no doubt touch upon this again. 25 years after it was going to be the biggest thing ever. Maybe we're reaching that plateau of productivity where actually we're starting to see inch by inch some real good progress on RFID beyond just apparel.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Adrian, and see you next time.
Cheers, Colin. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to all the ECR retail loss community for the sharing of their knowledge, their research and latest learnings that ensure that we become truly a global platform for learning. My name is Colin Peacock. This is the Sell More and Lose Less podcast, and if you liked it, please subscribe so you automatically get all future episodes. And also, if you think your colleagues and friends might also like it, please ask them to follow ECR Retail Loss on LinkedIn and tune in to our next podcasts. If you didn't like it, then let us know and we'll try and fix it. Either way, see you next time. Thank you again.